Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Let's face it, cyber attackers have the advantage. Extra Hop is on a mission to help you take it back. Regain the upper hand with security that can't be undermined, outsmarted, or compromised. When you don't have to choose between protecting your business and moving it forward, that's security uncompromised. See how it works in the full product demo, free online at securityweekly.com/Extra Hop. Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful, real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter to succeed. CyberSync continuous control automation ingests data from the IT GRC stack to update controls against regulatory requirements and risks in real time, delivering insights and visibility. See how members of the Fortune 500 are saving millions annually by visiting securityweekly.com/CyberSync.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Ben Carr. Security Weekly Unlocked will be held in person this December 5th through 7th at the Hilton Lake Buena Vista. Keynotes from Melissa Miller, John Strand, Leslie Carhart, Dave Kennedy, and Merrill Vernon. Visit securityweekly.com/unlocked to register for free and join us down in Florida. Also, join us for our next live webcast on December 2nd to see what's under the XDR hood. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to save your seat. Don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Gentlemen, my articles for the week, there's some good leadership ones in here. I love this first article. There's actually these first two articles. I like these articles because they're really great ways to think about leadership. And this first one talks about the gardener and the 4 characteristics of leadership, having grown up in a family full of farmers and orchards. I love this analogy because I think about growing up as a kid with my grandparents, my dad, my stepdad's a farmer. The knowledge they have, the things they understand to grow crops, and this is in the gardener sense, even plants. It's just amazing. I learned a ton in my childhood just watching my grandparents and my parents do what they did. And I thought this was a really interesting way to think about leadership skills and those attributes that are very aligned to that same kind of environment.
Yeah, no, I love the analogy as well. And you know, we always talk about the care and feeding needed to be a good leader and to lead, you know, high performing teams. And, you know, this fits right into that conversation. And you're absolutely right. The know, right? You know, a good farmer not only knows the business of farming, but they know the people, they know the relationships, they know the partners that they need, right? And they know the folks who are working the farm for them and with them. So that initial, they know, it's really about building that institutional knowledge and learning all of the things you need to learn. And hey, by the way, passing down that information to the next generation of farmer.
Yeah, the compelling part for me was, they made this comment to like knowing the soil, right? And I think that's really an interesting analogy that, you know, coming in as a CISO to an org, I think a lot of people, again, it goes back to that people try to come in and bring technology to fix a problem, and it really doesn't have anything to do with technology. I think you have to know the business, you have to know the corporate culture, you have to know how that interaction is going to play to be able to put the right program forward. And then it's about bringing those people up to be able to deliver, right? Because ultimately people are the asset that we're really trying to cultivate long term.
Yeah. And they're there to protect. They want to see the team or the crop thrive, right? I mean, I remember my stepdad going out and having to go water the fields in the middle of the night. You do that because that's what you have to do to protect the crops, to make sure enough water is getting on the fields. Think about your team and how you water them and help them grow and thrive in their careers. Just some great analogies in this article. That's why I love it so much.
And to your point, Matt, they protect, right? I mean, if it's a bad year and a bad crop, they don't go out there and point fingers at the folks, the helping hands on the farm, right? They take some level of ownership and some level of accountability as the leader of the organization. I mean, you know, we've talked about this and we've had Paul on. I always fall back to some of the military leadership as well, and you know that book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. That a statement that he puts in that book is, you know, always comes to bear in these situations, and leaders must own everything, right? There's no one else to blame except the leader. That's where ultimate accountability lands, and that's true, you know, in this situation of a farmer. You know, they're not pointing fingers at the folks working the farm if they have a bad year.
Yep, exactly right. Now that ties into the second article, and HBR, Harvard Business Review, does great articles on leadership and communication. This one talks about the differences a little bit between leadership and management, which is interesting as we get further down in this article. But it talks about the 5 myths of management. And the first one, I near and dear to my heart. Successful businesses set stretch goals. Do they? And I bring this up because we're in budgeting season. And I think last year there were lots of aspirations about our budget without a lot of reality in what does that actually mean. I think a manager in management's much better at setting realistic expectations, and then hopefully you can exceed those. This is a big one for me this year because when it comes to our budget and numbers, I want to make sure they're based on something solid and foundational.
Yeah, 100%, Matt. And it's kind of funny. Like I've gone through a lot of these leadership iterations of, you know, the Jim Collins BHAGs and the 40X WIGs, you know, wildly important goals. And I've gone through all of those leadership certifications and classes and things of that nature. And for me, it's always about the balance, right? These are best practices, they're frameworks you can use, they're tools you can use. But, you know, one of the things coming out of 4 disciplines of execution is goals need to be achievable and measurable. Otherwise, it's not even worth it. Why have a wildly importantly goal if you can't measure it and it's not an achievable goal? You'll never win the game.
Well, I think it can also be disheartening for the team, right? If I've seen organizations that have tried to implement this and they do it kind of across everybody. And then as a result, like everybody's got these like super high stretch goals, or, you know, you talk about BHAGs, right? The WIGs. I think, you know, people look at those and they go, well, if we can't attain them, like, what's the point? Right. And, you know, I think, you know, that audacious goal concept is, you need the moonshots, but you also need just to be able to pave the roads too, right? Not everything is going to make it to the moon. And so I think that challenge can really breed confusion, I think, at the IC level. The thing that resonated with me was point number 3. Like I started to think about it, and I wonder if we you know, in the war for talent, like, should we really be playing cyber Moneyball? Like we don't need everybody to be a talent, right? We just need to win the end of the game. And so there's a lot of people we can source that aren't, you know, rock star talent, but can get the job done and are slow and steady, wins the race kind of people. And I think that's how we have to look at this talent shortage, you know, in just through a different mindset and a different lens.
Yeah. And I actually pulled out a comment to that point, Ben. You know, the comment that I pulled out that really rang with me, it's the performance of the many, right? Not the talented few. So that's what I really pulled out of that. That's the mark of a great organization. It's you know, it's the performance of the many that's going to make us successful. And
then again, if everybody sees that they have a role to play and participate, that brings the whole team forward, as opposed to, you know, the perception that there's 1 or 2 rock stars on the team and they're carrying all the water weight.
Yeah, no doubt. And you know, I really liked the last one where it's no rules. And the comment that I pulled out of the article was, you know, it's not between having rules and having no rules, but between having good rules and bad rules, right? Eliminate the bad rules, but make sure you have structure in place, you know, and they equated it to like, it's just like music. Without the rules of harmony, rhythm, and tempo, music is just noise.
Yeah.
I do like number 4 only because I think everybody thinks you need leaders and not managers. Wrong. You need both. And, you know, when I think about leaders and the need to innovate and drive to the cutting edge, somebody has to manage the vision and the execution behind it. I look at my own team. today. I mean, I couldn't get anywhere without Bill or Sam or Victor, right? They are the ones managing through all the processes. Managers play a huge role in an organization. If we were all leaders, we'd be all chiefs and no Indians, right? I mean, nobody would get anything done. Somebody has to be there to get the underlying pieces and work done. I think managers have a huge role to play in an organization.
Oh, big time. I mean, how many times, and I've fallen victim to this as well as a leader, where you have this, this brainstorm, this epiphany of this, this new innovation or new project you want to go down, or initiative you want to go down, or new service offering you want to present. And, you come out and you think it's the next best thing. And then you have your managers come in and say, well, how are we going to execute against this? And hey, by the way, have you thought of that? And have you thought of what it's going to take to actually get to this strategic goal that you're looking to achieve? And then that sense of reality of it may be more effort to execute and it's not going to end up being profitable or successful, or it's too much of a moonshot. That reality, when it comes to the table, you have to take that into consideration.
It's balance, right? Like in everything, there is balance. And like, if you get off track with that, if everything's a big idea, like nothing will get done, right? And if there are no big ideas, like you're never going to create foundational change. So it's balance in that equation. You need leaders, you need ICs, you need managers, you need a whole chain. And I think it's just, I don't know, the sexiness of words and what we want to achieve aspirationally gets in the way of the reality of like what we actually need to get things done.
100%.
Yes. The State of the CISO article boils this down to three things. These are the three things CISOs need to do to build credibility and confidence with their peers and stakeholders. I love this list. Develop and manage key stakeholders, understand the business. We've talked about that a ton on this show, and be able to demonstrate value.
Yeah, seems so simple, doesn't
100%. Go ahead, Ben.
Seems simple.
I just said it seems so simple, right? It's just those three things.
Right.
Things and you're good.
Say easy, do hard, like we talk about a lot here.
Yeah, let's go grab a beer and relax. Everything's done now. It is that easy, but it's the devil's such in the details of that. Like manage stakeholders. Yeah, fun times. Yeah, it's going to be big a challenge, right?
And define stakeholders, because there are many. It's not just internal business units. It's your customers. It's your partners. There's so much involved in building those strategic relationships and developing and managing those relationships, right? And at the end of the day, I think that's a precursor to understanding the business, because the deeper the relationships you get, the better you're going to understand where those stakeholders are in the business. So, I think those two intertwine, but that's a hard, long-term journey.
Mm-hmm. And I think 1 and 2 are easy to understand. I think where a lot of people go astray is 3, right? Like, what is value to the business from the CISO's perspective? Like, and how does the business actually view it differently than the CISO? Like, you need to align so you really understand what's the perception of value from the CEO, from the board, whoever your direct manager might be. Like, that alignment to actually understanding value is going to be key to your success long term if you execute 1 and 2 well.
Yeah, and honestly, I think this ties back into the second article, because if the business does a good job setting its strategic goals, all of the business units are going to be able to align to those strategic goals. And if we as the CISO can create those achievable and measurable goals that align up to the strategic goals of the business as a whole, that's where we're going to start being able to articulate the value that we bring to the table.
Yeah, and I think from a goal and value perspective, it's interesting to note that what you incentivize people to do is the action that they're going to take, right? So if you incentivize operations for uptime, like anytime you ask for a patch, it's not going to happen because it contradicts uptime, right? And so you need to set the goals that actually dictate the behavior that you want to have as an end result. And that's really key to then at the end, demonstrating the value. If you have the goals in everybody's, yearly goals or objectives, then I think you're going to have much more success at demonstrating value, because those people are going to be incentivized to align with what the company mandates are.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Ben, because as leaders, if there's anything we can tell our future security leaders is that the things that we implement drive behavior. right? So the goals, the incentives, all of those things are going to drive behavior. So just be careful of the law of unintended consequences. Really think through the long term.
Be careful of the messages you're sending. Yeah.
That's right. 100%.
Yeah. And I paired this article with the Zoom article because you say easy, do hard. Like, how do I execute on some of this, right? And, this is some takeaways from Jason Lee, having joined Zoom, on how to simplify aspects of the security strategy. And there's some interesting tips in here around standardizing around best practices, standardizing design processes, et cetera, that I thought was an interesting way to think about how do I start to streamline and simplify some of the things that CISOs need to do in their organizations.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like the article. It's in many aspects, maybe we've overcomplicated our programs, right? And I think aligning to an industry best practice is great. But again, no, it's a framework or a best practice that you need to make your own, right? Based on your company, your culture, the financial situation of your organization, the investment that your organization is going to put in, both from a business support and a fiscal support. But yeah, I mean, leverage a best practice so you have that central point that you can build your program off of. I love that piece of it. Real-time feedback loop. I think the author could have added a little bit more things, because real-time feedback isn't just customer, it's employee, it's partner, it's all of the business unit stakeholders, it's the board, right? So I think having feedback loops across all of those stakeholders is key. One of the topics I pulled out, or the statements I pulled out that I loved, is trust is the North Star. We've talked about that many times. Trust is the foundation of your ability to influence. So you have to build that trust in the organization.
I think one piece that was missed on this article was, the overarching theme of simplify is really great, but then we really didn't, in the article, double down on how you can simplify things. And I think about things like, password management, getting away from passwords, right? Where Microsoft is headed, not requiring somebody to have a 42-digit password. That just isn't scalable, doesn't work, right? Figuring out ways to align with the simplicity of human behavior, and to the last point on the last article, like align the goals with what you actually want from behavior. I think sometimes just overall we make things too difficult for end users and customers, when we can think about a way to achieve the same objective of security in a more simplistic fashion. And I would have liked to seen a little more, I think, in the article referencing that, because I think that's super important and something we've missed from a security perspective in the industry.
And this is where I think standardizing on a framework, standardizing design process can also simplify the number of vendors and solutions you need, which gets you there, right? And this article didn't go to that kind of conclusion, but if you think about it, if I'm standardizing around a common framework instead of trying to roll my own and mesh 4 or 5 together, and the last article talks about the different risk management frameworks, you take simplicity of the framework, standardization of the design process, that should also start to standardize your tool sets and your processes that you need. That should simplify things and give you some additional benefits, but he didn't quite go there, and I was hoping he would.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next article, why people are bad at risk assessment. We talk about risk. We talk about understanding risk. This article does a really good job of talking about the difficulties of actually assessing risk and why it's so difficult to do it. This was a great read. I don't know if you guys read it all, but it goes back to some of the earlier work done back in late 90s and early 2000s around some of the issues around cybersecurity compared to physical security. And ultimately it breaks down around your perception, around where you determine where you're safe and not. But long term, it's all about time. Like eventually everything fails, right? And the question is, from a risk assessment perspective, where does time come into the calculation to determine the overall potential impact of any single event? It's a really interesting read for anybody who wants to understand the challenges around risk management.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it too, but it made me start to question the balance between, because again, this article goes into the emotional side of feeling the risk and having some sense of urgency around, remediating a risk, let's say. So I took it from the perception of maybe a board member who doesn't quite understand cybersecurity as a whole, and may look at it and say, you want to know what, I don't perceive a high level of risk right now, and maybe it's a lack of understanding, or maybe it's not being articulated correctly. And then in here, it talks about facts alone don't move people, right? And talks about hitting on the emotional side. And I just, underneath that, I put FUD question mark, because we always talk about not accentuating fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but telling some of those horror stories will do that.
I took some different away, Jason. Like I didn't take, I totally get you on the FUD thing, right? Like that used to be, late 90s, early 2000s, like let's sell FUD, right? And then we got away from it. Like I think everybody tried to get away from it because it was too overused by a lot of vendors. And so people built up a tolerance for it and it didn't resonate. But I think where I went with is lizard brain, like out of this article, like it really related back to me. Like I in the last year, I've gotten more and more synced with, we need to focus on the human side of this and the psychology behind it. And I think bringing a psychologist or someone who understands those social interactions would be really beneficial for a lot of security teams. I get it. It's a budgetary issue, but still from security awareness training, from trying to interact with the board and get resonance, I think it's really important to understand how people perceive things and what their gut reaction is going to be. And you get much more out of that emotional response than you do with the data-driven response, because even with the data-driven, still behind that somewhere, there is some emotional component that's interwoven into it.
And I 100% agree, Ben. What I guess my point to this is, be careful not to fall victim into FUD, right?
Yeah.
Because right here, we're saying tell stories. Now, yes, we definitely want to hit the emotional side, but we have to be careful how we tell the story. So that way, as leaders, we're not falling victim to using fear, uncertainty, and doubt as that crutch again. I don't want to go back there, I guess is my point.
Yeah. And I think some sales orgs do this poorly, right? Like the story they tell is a fear story, right? Versus telling the problem set and the solution in a way that can be understood through a story arc. It doesn't have to result in fear. It just has to be something that emotionally you can understand the journey as opposed to just the tech data behind it.
Right.
So that totally makes sense if that's where you're going with that at the night line.
This article makes me fall back to the security versus safety aspects of risk, right? Yeah. I think about this is if you can articulate this more in a safety setting than a security setting, you have a little more appreciation for it. It creates that kind of sense or impact to the individual. Because I go back to my nuclear power days, I go back to my very short stint in oil and gas. Like, it was all about safety. It wasn't about security, because people could die, right? Now, I don't want you to go over the top with it, but if you can find a way to make security feel more like a safety issue, then I think aspects of risk management are better addressed and handled, because people have an appreciation, I think more of appreciation for safety than they do security.
Yeah, agreed. And we can tell the story with a level of sense of urgency without falling victim to those old school FUD mentalities again, right? But it's all about, like Ben said, the story arc, how you tell that story, how you articulate what you're trying to get folks to understand.
Yep. Next article, 5 common cybersecurity myths. I love number 2. I just love it. Using a great security solution is enough.
Yeah, I mean, these are all items we know about, and at the end of the day, we know it's just not technology. It's not the blinky light that's going to do it.
Yeah, and I think number 4 really gets to me, because I think about the change in terminology over the years, over the last 25 years, from terms like information security to cybersecurity, and this concept that cyber threats are only external. No, they're internal. Yeah. They're there. They've been there for a long time, right? Like the way we changed the narrative around cybersecurity almost made it feel like everything was external to us, and that's what we had to protect against, when that's truly not the case. And I think sometimes our language or what we call things actually have been a detriment, not a help to the industry.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the ones I hear a lot is I'm safe because I have a security expert on my team. We'll hear that from folks that we engage with, potential customers, things of that nature. And I always try to educate. It's a responsibility of the entire community to put security first, not just one individual in the IT team who has security in their title.
Yeah, I'm actually more interested when I talk, especially like with vendors, I'm more interested that they're thinking about the question than the solution they're proposing, right? Like, are they actually considering the once in a lifetime kind of problems? Like, and okay, you've appropriately categorized it from a risk side, but I don't want to just hear that you've got a great program in place, so there's no worries.
Right, exactly right. The seventh article, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I put it here more as a reference because we've been talking about simplification of your process and standardizing around standards. We talked about challenges around risk management. This last article talks about the 5 kind of risk management frameworks. And I think this is a great article for people who are looking at their risk management program, looking at the pros and cons across the different frameworks. I've used 3 of these 5 in my past over my career: the NIST, RMF, Octave, and FAIR. I've used, right? I've used those 3, or no, COBIT. I use COBIT, not Octave.
Yeah, I was thinking COBIT. Yeah, I was thinking if you used Octave, that was a strange one, but yeah.
No.
Yeah. I would argue that, although it has some risk best practices within it, COBIT is not a risk management framework. And Mark, actually, I think it was Mark in the article. So just total transparency, Mark Thomas is awesome. eScout, he works for, he's part owner of eScout. He works for ISACA. I've trained in COBIT and NIST with Mark. Great teacher, great educator. And I actually have a COBIT manual on aligning to NIST behind me right here. And it's not a risk management framework at the end of the day. It's IT governance. So I just want to make sure that that's out there.
Right.
But it does have some risk capabilities with it. But when you couple that with the RMF, it's powerful.
Yeah, and I like the maturity model in COBIT, right? I like the maturity model in COBIT. That's what I've used the most from the COBIT framework, is that maturity model.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter which framework you pick, just pick one. Pick something and work it, right? Because like the point is that you have something in place that you're managing towards, not that you're selecting one specifically, as long as it aligns with your business.
100% agreed, Ben.
Yeah. So it's a great article for anybody who's looking at the risk management side of the business, looking at the different frameworks, wants to understand, where they might want to standardize. Great article. It goes into some great detail. Plus, he's got links to all 5 of them. So it's a great reference article. That's why I put it here. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.